Welcome back, everybody. Well, I just actually received a photograph this morning, and I have tweeted it, and it's quite a moving photograph of the skyline of New York at the moment, and it's a picture of the Empire State Building, and I'm sure many of you know whenever the Empire State Building is lit, it's lit in different colors, and it kind of represents, you know, whatever is happening around the world, whatever it may be. And today, or I suppose tonight in America, it is black, and that, of course, is after what happened in Orlando and that absolutely terrible shooting in that club on Saturday in Orlando, and also the Bank of America being lit in the rainbow flag. And that, of course, is, I suppose, in commemoration with the gay community, the lesbian and gay community at this time after that horrific shooting. So, yeah, something interesting. If you'd like to see it, go and have a look at that photograph. It's at Leanne Manus, and it's really moving, I must say. Now, for many people who labored for years, the thought of retirement it's actually quite soothing, but only 10% of South Africans will actually enjoy a decent retirement, and this is according to our Finance Minister, Pravin Gordhan. A South African investment organisation says, unfortunately, the greater majority of employees in the country are not interested in educating themselves about the importance of saving. This investment organisation also says the retirement industry habitually blames savers for these poor outcomes for their savings. Now, joining us in our Cape Town studio is Tracy Jensen. She's the Chief Product Architect at 10X Investments, or 10 Times Investments. I never know. I always get this one wrong. Tracy, help me out. 10 Times or 10X?
Hi, it's 10X Investments.
Thank you. There we go. 10X Investments. It's great to have you on the program. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you.
So, I mean, it's quite a scary statistic when one looks at the fact that we work our whole lives, we work really, really hard, and yet only 10% of South Africans are expected to have a decent retirement. Is that how bad the savings rate is?
It's not necessarily the savings rate, actually. It's the common mistakes people make along the way. So, I mean, as you know, preservation is very topical. So people cash in because they want to pay down their debt, which doesn't sound bad at the time, or they don't realize how high their fees are and the actual impact that can have, or they wait for their portfolio to do poorly, then they try and chase the next winner, and so they switch. So there's 4 common mistakes that people tend to make that together can have a dramatic impact on their outcome.
Yeah. All right. Talk us through these 4 dramatic mistakes we all make.
Okay. So they're actually simple, but they have a dramatic impact.
Yeah.
So the first is, if you look at it, it's called asset allocation. So it's basically how much should you have in shares versus property versus cash. So that combination. Mm-hmm. And research shows that a high equity, which means it's about 75% in growth investment shares and property, gives you the best outcome. To illustrate, over the last 60 years, if you had invested in shares, you would have had 40 times more than in cash and bonds. So you can see how significant that is.
Yeah.
So that's the first one. Then secondly is fees. Make sure you understand all your fees and that they're below 1%. Because again, 1% fee over your working life can reduce your money by 40%. So it's really dramatic. Then the third one is switching. We all get tempted. You know, we monitor our portfolio, it does worse and worse. And eventually at some point we decide, no, we're going to chase the next winner. But if you do that, you're basically selling your investments cheaply and buying the most expensive.
Yeah.
So that, again, there's been a lot of research that dramatically reduces your outcome at retirement. And then the last one is, don't be tempted to cash in prior to retirement. So we always have some financial need we need to meet. Yeah. But in the end, we're just kicking the can down the road and you can't catch up.
I think that's possibly one of the best advices that anybody can give. I mean, you know, you kind of think to yourself, right, let's cash in. We need the money now. We can worry about that later. But the reality is that when it comes to your retirement, you cannot worry about that later. You need to worry about it now. Between medical costs, housing, putting food on your table, one cannot live on just the government pension, and this has been spoken about over and over again, and that's what a lot of people are finding themselves in that situation, I imagine, from your experience.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I had a phone call a couple of months ago. The person has 100,000 Rand, and they asked me how I can invest it so they can get 5,000 Rand a month. I said, you know what I mean? It's very sad, but it's too late, because basically you missed out on the compounding. So if you cash in only once, so a relatively good person, cashes in after 20 years and you've got 20 years left, you have to save 4 times as much to be in the same position. And nobody can do that.
Talk to us about some great investment tools, I mean, particularly aimed at retirement, because I know you've given us all 4 of the tips here, but, you know, where under these current situations that we find ourselves in, it's a very tough economic climate out there, and obviously money is difficult to come by, never mind extra money to save. But what do you recommend? Where is the best place to put money for retirement?
Okay, so I don't know if you've heard much about National Treasury's draft default regulation paper. So they talk about the kind of investment. So you want something that's simple. If you don't understand it, don't invest in it. They also talk about passive investing, which basically means you track the market as opposed to trying to beat the market. They talk about low cost. It shouldn't have an insurance element mixed in there because, again, that adds complexity and then you're mixing 2 different things. So basically, if you're investing for the long term, you're looking for what's called a high equity portfolio. So it's got predominantly invested in shares and property. You're looking for something that's ideally a passive investment, low cost, and easy to understand.
And I think one of the questions that I always ask, and I suppose when a lot of people say, you know, when they speak to older people, what is your greatest regret financially through life? And a lot say, not investing early enough for my retirement. That's probably one of the biggest financial regrets a person makes. So with this in mind, let's give that advice again. When do you start investing for your retirement? And how much should you invest for your retirement out of what you earn?
Okay, so you should start as soon as you get your first job, even if it, you know, doesn't pay a lot. Because I always think, oh, I'm not earning a lot now, I'll do it later. So rather make saving a priority and adjust your living standard. And you should be putting away 15% of your gross. So that's before tax, before any deductions. And a lot of people, I think, as I say, they start low, and when they get to about their late 40s, then they suddenly go, oh, I better look at this, and they start taking interest, and then they try and catch up. But you just, as I said, because of the missed compound interest, you actually cannot catch that up.
Yeah. It's actually amazing, and people don't factor interest into the equation because, you know, I remember having a look back at I think it was an aunt of mine or a mother, I'm not too sure who it was, but it was like a 21st gift that they were given from somebody, and this was when, I think they're now around about 50 years old, but at the time, when they were 21 years old, they got a gift of R1.50 for their 21st, and this was like wonderful at the time. That was like, gee whiz, look how generous they are, you know, or 10 Rand, and that was really blowing the bank. And now you look at what that's worth now, it's worth nothing. So, I mean, you have to understand that the cost of living goes up every day we're breathing.
Absolutely, yeah. Einstein actually said compound interest is the 8th wonder of the world.
Oh, yeah.
So if he's in agreement with that, I think we can all agree that that's definitely has a big impact.
Yeah, indeed. But do South Africans save enough? I mean, is that, you know, let's talk about South Africans in general. Do we save enough, or have we got a long way to go to get to an adequate savings rate?
So actually, quite interestingly, if you look at the pension funds that are around, the savings rate that's actually going in is quite good. I might have the stat wrong, but offhand, if I recall correctly, it's about 12%. And as I said, we should be at about 15. So we're not that far off. But it's these 4 common mistakes that trustees basically say to members, you choose your investment. So they delegate a lot of the responsibility to them. You choose how much to contribute in many cases. And you choose, you know, they allow switching. So it's structurally, it's set up against investors. And then disclosures are poor. You know, it's complicated. People don't understand what's going on. So I think it's all of these things that impact on us. So obviously that's in the retirement space. In the non-retirement space, our saving rate is not great. But that's not our fundamental problem. It's what we're doing with what we are saving.
Yeah. It's been a pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much for giving us this advice, and it's really important advice. Tracy Jensen, Chief Product Architect in our Cape Town studios from 10X Investments, and talking to us about retirement and when one should start saving for retirement. And as you heard the advice, it's never early enough to retire. That first paycheck, you need to start always doing that. So it's a very important conversation to have in your family and with yourself, actually. Let's take a break.